The courage to be vulnerable, turning weakness into strength. I want you to take a moment and think about a time in your life when you felt vulnerable, when you felt exposed, unsure, or even weak. Now, I bet your first instinct was to hide it, to cover it up, and to keep it from the world. We are taught from an early age that vulnerability is something to be avoided, something that makes us appear weak. But what if I told you that the exact opposite is true? What if vulnerability is not a weakness, but the key to unlocking your greatest strength? Today, I'm going to talk about the courage to be vulnerable. We live in a world that glorifies strength, power, and perfection. We're told to keep it together, to never let them see you sweat. But here's the thing. Real strength doesn't come from pretending everything is fine when it's not. Real strength comes from having the courage to be vulnerable, to admit when we're struggling, and to ask for help when we need it. I want to share a personal story. There was a time in my life when I thought vulnerability was a sign of failure. I was in a situation where I felt like I had to be strong for everyone else, my family, my colleagues, even my friends. I didn't want anyone to see that behind the scenes, I was struggling. But no matter how much I tried to hold it all together, I felt like I was falling apart on the inside. One day, I reached my breaking point. I couldn't keep pretending everything was fine. So, for the first time in a long time, I opened up to someone I trusted. I told them how I really felt. And you know what? That moment of vulnerability didn't make me weaker. It made me stronger. Because in admitting that I wasn't okay, I finally gave myself permission to heal, to grow, and to rebuild from a place of authenticity. That moment taught me that vulnerability isn't the enemy. It's the gateway to real connection, real growth, and real strength. Vulnerability is often misunderstood. We think that being vulnerable means we're weak, that we're exposing ourselves to judgment or failure. But the truth is, vulnerability is what makes us human. It's what connects us to others on a deeper level. Think about the relationships in your life, the ones that matter most. Aren't they built on moments of realness, when you let down your guard and showed someone who you really are, flaws and all? Brené Brown, a leading researcher on vulnerability, says it best. Vulnerability is not winning or losing. It's having the courage to show up and be seen when we have no control over the outcome. And that's the scary part, right? We don't like uncertainty. We want to be in control. But here's the reality. By trying to control everything, we rob ourselves of the possibility for growth, for connection, and for true transformation. I know being vulnerable is scary. It takes courage to say, I don't have all the answers. It takes courage to admit I'm struggling or I need help. But that's where real growth happens. That's where real strength comes from. Because when you allow yourself to be vulnerable, you're no longer hiding behind a mask. You're stepping into your truth. Think about it. What would your life look like if you stopped pretending to have it all together? If you allowed yourself to be real, to be honest about your struggles, your fears, your dreams? Imagine the weight that would lift off your shoulders. Imagine the deep, authentic connections you could build with others. Vulnerability opens the door to all of that. I want you to take a moment and think about one area of your life where you've been afraid to be vulnerable. Maybe it's at work, maybe it's in a relationship, or maybe it's with yourself. Now turn to the person next to you and share that vulnerability. I know it's uncomfortable. But just by acknowledging it out loud, you're taking the first step toward turning that weakness into a strength. When you share your vulnerability, something amazing happens. The other person isn't judging you, they're relating to you. They've been there. They felt that too. And in that moment, you realize that vulnerability isn't isolating, it's unifying. Vulnerability is also the birthplace of creativity and innovation. Think about the artists. The entrepreneurs, the leaders who have changed the world. Do you think they played it safe, hiding behind walls of perfection? No. They took risks. They put themselves out there, knowing they might fail, knowing they might be criticized. But they did it anyway. And in doing so, they created something beautiful, something lasting. When we stop trying to be perfect, we open ourselves up to new possibilities. We give ourselves permission to fail, to learn, and to grow. And that's where real strength comes from. Not from avoiding failure, but from embracing it. So, how do we start turning vulnerability into strength? It begins with a mindset shift. Instead of seeing vulnerability as a weakness, we have to recognize it as an act of courage. It takes courage to be honest with ourselves and with others. It takes courage to face our fears head on instead of running from them. If you want to grow, if you want to succeed, if you want to build real, meaningful connections in your life, you have to be willing to be vulnerable. You have to be willing to show up even when you don't have all the answers. You have to be willing to risk failure in order to achieve greatness. I'll leave you with this. Vulnerability is not a weakness, it's your superpower. It's the thing that will connect you to others, that will allow you to grow, that will push you toward your greatest potential. So stop hiding behind the mask. Stop pretending you have it all together. Have the courage to be vulnerable and watch how that courage transforms your life. Because at the end of the day, it's not about being perfect, it's about being real. And when you have the courage to be real, that's when you discover your true strength. Like, share, and subscribe for your daily motivational coffee.